I never thought my own family would betray me, but they didn't just betray me, they erased me. And the worst part was, they were completely confident I would never find out. My name is Claire Morgan. And this is the story of how my parents tried to sell my grandmother's house without telling me, without asking me, and without realizing one small detail that would destroy everything they planned. I grew up in a small coastal town in Oregon. It wasn't a wealthy place, nothing fancy or glamorous. Just quiet streets, old trees, and one house that meant everything to me. My grandmother's house stood at the end of Maple Street, made of old wood, slightly faded paint, but full of life. That house wasn't just a building. It was memories. Summer mornings with fresh bread, winter nights around the fireplace, laughter echoing through every room. My grandmother always said that this house carried our family's soul, and I believed her completely. Even when she got older, she would sit on her rocking chair near the window and say, "This house will always stay in our bloodline. No matter what happens, it belongs to us." I never questioned that. I never thought I needed to. But everything started changing after she passed away. At first, it was subtle. My parents started talking differently about the house. They said it was too big, too old, too expensive to maintain. They said it made more sense to do something practically with it. I didn't like the way they said it, but I thought they were just being emotional. I thought they still respected my grandmother's memory. But I was wrong. One day, I came home early from college. The moment I stepped near the house, I noticed something was off. My father's car wasn't there. My mother wasn't answering calls. And the house was open. Inside, I saw strangers. Men in suits, walking around with clipboards, measuring walls, taking photos, discussing renovation value and resale prices like they already owned the place. I stood frozen. My heart started racing. I asked one of them, "What are you doing in this house?" He looked at me casually and said the words that broke something inside me. "This property has been sold." For a few seconds, I couldn't process it. Sold? That made no sense. I ran outside and called my mother immediately. When she finally answered, her voice was calm, too calm. Like she was talking about something normal. "Yes, Claire, we sold it." I asked her how that was even possible. That house belonged to Grandma. That house was family memory. She replied, "It belonged to the family, and we decided as a family." Then I asked the question that mattered most. "What about me?" There was silence on the other end. A long, heavy silence. And then she said something I will never forget. "You were never part of the decision." That night, I couldn't sleep. Something inside me didn't accept it. Because I remembered something my grandmother once told me, something she said very seriously, almost like a warning. She had said, "Never trust what they tell you about this house. Always check the deed yourself." At the time, I didn't understand what she meant. But now, those words kept repeating in my mind. The next morning, I went to the county records office. I didn't tell anyone. I just needed answers. I waited in line for almost an hour, holding my breath the entire time. When I finally got the documents, my hands were shaking. I opened the property deed. And I saw something I was not prepared for. My grandmother's name was still on it. Not removed. Not transferred. Still legally listed as the primary owner. My mind went blank. If the house was sold, then how? I went back home immediately, and this time I confronted my father directly. He didn't look surprised. In fact, he looked annoyed. Like I was interrupting something already finished. He said, "Stop digging into things you don't understand." But I wasn't stopping anymore. I contacted a lawyer the next day. The lawyer reviewed the documents carefully, and after a long silence, he said something that changed everything. "This sale is not legally valid." Because my grandmother's name was still on the deed, and no proper transfer of ownership had ever been completed. Which meant the house was never legally theirs to sell. The moment I heard that, everything inside me changed. The fear disappeared. The confusion disappeared. Only one thing remained. Truth. And now I understood something else too. This wasn't just a mistake. This was intentional. My parents didn't accidentally sell it. They tried to push it through knowing something wasn't right. And they assumed no one would check. But they didn't know one thing. My grandmother had prepared for this long before she died. And the next document I discovered would prove she expected exactly this situation. Because hidden inside her old safe, behind a false wooden panel in her bedroom closet, there was a sealed envelope with my name on it. And when I opened it, everything changed again. That night, I couldn't sleep. My grandmother's words kept repeating in my head like an echo I couldn't escape, and never trust what they say about this house. Always check the deed yourself. I never understood it before, but now it felt like she was warning me from the past. Early the next morning, I went straight to the county records office. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't ask anyone. I just needed the truth. The building was cold, quiet, and full of old paper records and legal files that smelled like dust and time. I stood in line, my heart beating faster every second, until finally my name was called. When I requested the property deed for my grandmother's house, the clerk didn't look surprised. He simply typed something into the system and printed the document. My hands were shaking as I took it. I opened the deed. And everything stopped. My grandmother's name was still listed as the primary owner of the house. Not transferred. Not removed. Still legally active. For a moment, I thought it was a mistake. I double-checked every line, every signature, every page. But it was real. Legally, the house still belonged to my grandmother. So if that was true, then how did my parents sell it? I rushed back home immediately. My mind was racing with confusion, anger, and fear all mixed together. When I arrived, I found my father in the living room as if nothing had happened. He was reading the newspaper, calm and completely unbothered. I showed him the document. His expression changed only slightly, like he had been waiting for this moment. I asked him, "How could you sell a house that is not legally transferred to you?" He sighed and said, "Claire, stop making this complicated." But I wasn't backing down anymore. I told him, this is fraud if it wasn't legally transferred." For the first time, he looked directly at me and said, "You don't understand how the real world works." But I did understand one thing clearly now. Something was wrong. That evening, I contacted a lawyer. I didn't even care about cost. I just wanted someone professional to confirm what I was seeing. I sent him all the documents, every page, every detail. The next day, the lawyer called me back. His tone was serious. He said, "You need to come to my office immediately." When I arrived, he placed the deed on the table and said something that changed everything. "This property was never legally transferred after your grandmother's death." I asked him again to explain. He leaned forward and said, That means your grandmother is still the legal owner. Any sale made without proper transfer of ownership is invalid. My heart dropped. He continued, In simple terms, this house cannot be legally sold by your parents. A silence filled the room. Then I asked the question I already feared the answer to. Then why did they sell it? The lawyer looked at me carefully and said, Either they didn't check the documents, or they knew and ignored it. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. This wasn't confusion anymore. This was deception. I walked out of that office with a strange feeling. Not just anger, but clarity. Because now I knew this wasn't a mistake. It wasn't an accident. Someone had tried to take advantage of incomplete legal transfer. And worse, they thought I would never find out. But there was still something I didn't understand. Why did my grandmother keep the deed like this? Why was it never transferred? And what did she mean when she told me to check the deed myself? I didn't know it yet. But inside her old house, hidden in a place no one had searched properly, there was something waiting for me. Something she left behind, specifically for this moment. And when I found it, everything I believed about my family would collapse completely. After I discovered the truth about the deed, something inside me completely changed. I wasn't just confused anymore. I was awake. I started seeing every memory, every conversation, every small detail in a different light. My grandmother's warning was no longer just a random sentence. It was a message. A carefully placed warning meant for this exact moment. I returned to the house again, but this time I wasn't emotional. I wasn't scared. I was focused. The house felt different now, like it was holding secrets behind every wall. I walked slowly through the hallway, looking at every corner, every door, every space my grandmother used to spend time in. I remembered how she always refused to let anyone touch her bedroom closet, how she used to lock it even during daytime. That memory kept coming back. I went straight to her old bedroom. Nothing looked unusual at first. The furniture was still there, covered lightly with dust. The bed, the chair, the old curtains, it all looked frozen in time. But then I noticed something strange. The closet didn't fully close. One side of it was slightly misaligned, like it had been moved recently. My heart started beating faster. I approached it slowly and opened the closet door. Inside, there were old clothes, boxes, and storage items. But something felt off. I started checking carefully, pushing items aside, looking for anything unusual. That's when I noticed it. One wooden panel at the back didn't match the rest of the closet. It was slightly newer, slightly different in color. I pressed it gently. It moved. My breath stopped. With shaking hands, I pulled it open, and behind it was a small hidden space. Inside, there was a metal box covered in dust. I knew immediately this was not something ordinary. My hands were trembling as I took it out and placed it on the floor. It was locked. But not for long. I found a small key taped under the bottom of the drawer nearby, almost like it was meant to be found only when someone searched carefully enough. My grandmother always loved hiding things in clever places. I inserted the key. The lock clicked open. Slowly, I lifted the lid. Inside the box was a sealed envelope. Old, slightly yellowed, but carefully preserved. On the front, written in my grandmother's handwriting, were just 3 words, "Et Claire only." My hands froze. My throat tightened. I had seen my name on many things in life, but never like this. Never with this level of seriousness. I sat down on the floor and slowly opened the envelope. Inside was a letter. And the first line made my entire body go cold. My dear Claire, if you are reading this, then they have already tried to take what I protected. I couldn't believe it. My grandmother had predicted this. She had prepared for it. I continued reading, my hands shaking more with every line. She explained everything. How she never completed the legal transfer on purpose. How she kept her name on the deed as protection. Because she didn't trust certain family members to act responsibly after her death. She wrote that she had seen greed growing slowly in the family, especially after my grandfather passed away. But there was something even more shocking. She wrote that the house itself was not the most important part. There was something inside it. Something far more valuable than property. And she had hidden it until the right person found the truth. The letter ended with one instruction. Go to the old storage room beneath the house. Only the rightful person will find what I left there. At that moment, everything became clear. This was never just about a house. This was about something my family had been chasing without understanding what they were really risking. And now I knew. I was not done yet. Because whatever was in that storage room would decide everything. After reading my grandmother's letter, I couldn't sit still for even a second. My hands were shaking, but not from fear anymore. This time it was from realization. Everything was pointing me toward one place, the old storage room beneath the house. She didn't just mention it casually. She emphasized it like it was the final key to something much bigger. I went back to the house immediately. By now, the atmosphere of the place felt heavier, almost like the walls knew I was getting closer to the truth. I didn't tell my parents anything. I didn't want arguments. I just needed answers. I searched the lower floor carefully until I found something I had never paid attention to before, a narrow wooden door hidden behind an old storage cabinet near the kitchen. It didn't look important. In fact, it looked like part of the wall. But my grandmother always loved hiding important things in places no one would suspect. I pushed the cabinet aside. And there it was. A locked wooden door. My heart started racing again. I tried the handle. It didn't move. Then I remembered something else from the letter. Only the rightful person will find what I left there. That meant there had to be a way in. I started searching around the frame, touching every corner, every edge. Then I noticed a small engraving near the bottom, a faint mark shaped like a leaf. My grandmother used to carve small symbols like that. I pressed it. A soft click echoed through the floor. The lock released. Slowly, I opened the door. And a staircase appeared. Dark, narrow, and leading downward. I hesitated for only a second, and then I stepped inside. The air grew colder as I went down. The walls were old, made of stone and wood, untouched for years. At the bottom, there was a small underground room illuminated by a single hanging bulb. And what I saw inside made me stop completely. It wasn't empty. There were documents. Boxes. Old financial records. And a safe placed in the center of the room. But that wasn't the shocking part. The shocking part was the name written on the safe. Not my parents. Not even my grandmother. My name. Claire Morgan. I felt like the ground disappeared beneath me. I slowly walked forward and touched the safe. It was warm somehow, like it had been opened recently or maintained carefully. There was a note attached to it. Only one line. Open only when they betray you. My breath stopped. I already knew what that meant. My hands were shaking again as I entered the code. Strangely, the numbers came to my mind naturally, like I already knew them. The lock clicked instantly. The safe opened. Inside, there were property documents, bank papers, and something far more shocking: legal transfer forms, all pre-signed by my grandmother, dated years before her death. But there was more. A will. A second will. A hidden will. And when I read it, my entire reality collapsed. Everything, the house, the land, the financial assets connected to it, was not meant for my parents at all. It was left entirely to me. But only under one condition: that I must prove I could protect it from manipulation, greed, and false ownership attempts. My grandmother had planned everything. Even the mistake my parents made. Even the illegal sale attempt. Even my discovery. It was all part of her test. At that moment, I finally understood the truth. My parents didn't just try to sell a house. They unknowingly triggered a legal system that activated the final inheritance clause. And now, everything was about to change. The next morning, I walked into the lawyer's office again, but this time, I wasn't confused or scared. I placed all the documents on the table. The lawyer reviewed everything silently. And then he looked at me and said, "Congratulations, you are the sole legal owner." When my parents were called in, they came expecting control. But instead, they were handed reality. The sale was reversed. The transaction was void. And the ownership was legally transferred to me. My mother tried to speak. My father stayed silent for the first time. But I didn't shout. I didn't fight. I simply said one thing: this was never about revenge, it was about truth. I walked out of that office knowing something important. Sometimes, family doesn't break you all at once. They break you slowly, thinking you will never notice. But truth always finds a way. And my grandmother made sure of that.